can use the chat or the Q&A function at the bottom and submit questions as Dr. Acosta and Karla speak. And if anything comes up that you want to learn more about, or a question comes to mind, definitely ask, and we'll address it, or as many as we can. So just a reminder, when you signed up, there were some guidelines and rules, and I put them back in the chat, so you need to refer back to those. But we haven't really had any problems in any of our other events, so I don't anticipate that right now. Okay. So I will hand it over to Dr. Acosta. She's the CEO of YWCA El Paso.
Great. Thank you so much, Kayla. Karla, welcome. Welcome to YWCA's Courageous Conversations. I don't know if you're aware, but the mission of the YWCA is a pretty broad one. It's to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And so this is part of our mission-based programs in trying to just have conversations with people about different topics. And these are courageous conversations because sometimes you talk about things that you might not otherwise be asked. So, but you and I kind of went over that. So I'll be asking you lots of questions. And so welcome. We're so excited in El Paso.
Oh, I'm excited too.
We just love you here. We're so proud. We're like, whoop, whoop. But anyway, so let me begin by asking you, let's talk about you. You grew up in El Paso. Can you talk to us about growing up in El Paso and how your lived experiences shaped kind of where you are and how you got to where you are now?
So I was born in Florida. It's so funny because my husband makes fun of me because he's like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Now I'm from El Paso," but I was born in Florida. My parents were both from Mexico. My father was a doctor, and he moved to with my mom shortly after they were married to Orlando to do his residency as a doctor, and then they moved to New York and then to Tennessee, and then finally when I was in third grade and my older sister was going into fifth grade, we moved to El Paso. I have a younger brother that I think at the time was I'm 4 years older than him, so I think he must have been about 4. And then my youngest sibling was born when I was 10 in El Paso. So I think I really consider El Paso to be where I'm from. I don't know if this happened to you, we spoke a little bit about it, but I kind of never knew where I was from. I didn't feel fully Mexican, I didn't feel fully American, and I just kind of felt like welcome and part of El Paso and growing up there. I went to Loretto. I started at Polk, a small public school on the west side, and then I went to Loretto. And I made my lifelong friends that I still talk to, that are were in my wedding, that are very much part of my life. And I went to Loretto through 12th grade, and then I graduated in 1995, which feels like so long ago. And then my older sister went to University of Arizona, and so I followed in her footsteps. I kind of never felt fully welcome in the other parts of Texas, so I didn't really want to go to school there. So I went to University of Arizona for 4 years and graduated in 1999, and then moved to Paris for a year, and then moved to New York in 2000.
Wow. So you're, I want to kind of talk about two things you just mentioned. You said you didn't feel like you felt welcomed in other parts of Texas. You want to talk a little bit about that? Like, what does that mean?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's like your own perception, our own kind of insecurities or perception. But I always kind of felt like when you said you were from El Paso, you're like, where's that? Or like, I've never been, it's 12 hours away from Houston, which if you think about it is like going from Paris to Milan in a way, it's in like its own state. So I didn't really feel like, I don't know, I kind of felt like El Paso always got the bad rap of kind of being like the forgotten like stepchild. We didn't have like, at the time when you're growing up, we didn't have like a Hard Rock Cafe and like, an Abercrombie store and all those things that you think are important, but now you're like, thank God I didn't have those things. So I kind of felt like it was like I didn't really feel like fully at home in like an Austin, for example. I kind of wanted to go the other direction and go west.
You know, one of the things that is really interesting is how everybody says, oh, I've driven by there. I've driven through El Paso. Like, that's the favorite thing for people to say, oh yeah, El Paso, I've driven through there. So I think that's super interesting. One of the things I want to ask you about that, so you went to the University of Arizona. Did you know that this is what you wanted to do? Like, did you know to be a passion?
A little bit. I mean, I always knew that there was definitely that I loved fashion. I remember my best friend Audrey, who I was talking to today and who I met at Loretto in 4th grade. We met because she was wearing this Esprit sweatshirt that I liked. And I went up to her and I was like, where's your sweatshirt from? What brand is it? And my mom was like, you can't ask people that, Karla. It's rude. And so I didn't like it so much of the brand. I just always loved the way fashion made you feel. And in a funny way, like, even though in El Paso we didn't have these like super high-end stores like Neiman Marcus or Saks or like even like a Gap or a J. Crew for a long time, I felt like that people had a really interesting sense of style in El Paso. Like, you know, we were kind of always like, even in like the 6th grade, we were into that alternative kind of Depeche Mode moment and like the Smiths, and like there was some cool like underground music kind of influence in our fashion. And I always felt like my friends had really good sense of style, you know, like people were very aware of fashion, even though we weren't like a city where that you think of fashion, right, necessarily. And then obviously like later on in life, you realize that people have been buying cowboy boots in El Paso for years. And like, you know, we have like some of the best leather makers for boots, and people come to El Paso just to buy them. So I knew that it was something that I wanted to do. I remember my mom used to always be like, say to me, I'm not going to take you to the supermarket anymore because every time I come, I spend double, because I would buy all the magazines. And I knew then that I loved just reading and finding out about like insider things. And it was kind of like my window to New York and Paris and the world. And I was very aware of designer fashion. I remember my mom has a friend, her name is Mary Rolone. And I remember when she got a Chanel bag, and my mom was like, Mary got a Chanel bag. And I was like, oh, like, am I ever going to have one? I was like in 8th grade. I don't know where I got this stuff from, but I loved, like, you know, one of our neighbors in our neighborhood, like wore like 2-piece Chanel suits, you know, just like Jackie O. And so that I knew I wanted to do something, because I knew the way that I felt about fashion and how it made you feel and the power that it has, right? And not necessarily because it's expensive, but more of just the way you feel, right, when you wear something that you love. And it can be your grandmother's vintage dress or your mom's. My mom had like an old Diane von Furstenberg dress that, you know, were one of the original ones from the 70s. And so, so I knew I wanted to do something. I just didn't know what exactly. And then when I got to college, I kind of researched more and figured out that there were like so many things to do in fashion.
So one of the things that you mentioned earlier was about that whole misconception of El Paso. And I read an article, and you know what I'm going to ask you? I read an article that you talk about, where you talk about going for an interview. I think I won't say which magazine, but I'm just not going to say. But you went for an interview, and someone said to you, you know, what is this young girl from El Paso doing trying to get a job in New York? And you mentioned in that article that you thought that was kind of racist, and you and I talked about it. Can you talk about kind of that whole, like, because I'm sure going into that situation was already nerve-wracking. And do you want to talk about that situation?
Yeah, I remember. So I had just moved. So I graduated in 99. I somehow convinced my parents to let me move to France. Remember, I told you that they didn't let me study abroad. So my dad said, you can go after college, but you only if you have some sort of job. So I got an internship and kind of took a crash course in French and learned what I needed to learn. And really didn't want to leave, but I knew that I didn't have a visa. So I said, you know, I have to go. And so I moved to New York. My dad was like, listen, like, that's fine. Like, we let you do this for 6 months. You know, let's go find a job, basically. So I moved to New York in 2000, and I went on a lot of really great interviews with people who I had done internships before, which is, I always tell people, like, do internships, get some experience. And so I go to my one interview, and this woman turns to me and says, like, kind of little blonde woman with like a Southern twang, was like, now, how does a girl from El Paso come to work and move to New York City? She couldn't even like phrase the question because she knew it was probably extremely inappropriate. And I was like, you know, I think she had something very specific, like in the media world, of like what a person that works at a magazine where she should be from, where she should work, like what she should dress like, what she should look like, where she's from. And I just didn't fit into that stereotype that she had in her mind. And I think I did take that. I think it was one of my first jobs. And then I honestly, like, I have to say that, like, my being from El Paso and being Mexican was always kind of like, I mean, I always felt I had to prove, because my dad always used to say, like, you have to really prove yourself. Like, people have this misconception of Mexicans that we're not hardworking, and you're going to have to work double, and you're a woman, so then you have to work triple, and just to prove to people that, you know, you can do it and that you're here to stay. And so I kind of always had that in the back of my head. And it really helped me, I think. I think that comment kind of stayed with me for 20 years, and it's something that I think about all the time. And I'm glad that now, in hindsight, I kind of broke that stereotype. I'm glad that, like, a girl from El Paso came to question, you know, what the kind of right type of person is that works in media, right?
And how was that? Like, how was it for you going from El Paso, working in this environment where there were there were already preconceived notions of what that person should look like, what her pedigree should be, where she should have gone to school. I mean, all of these things come together. How did you have any challenges when you stepped into that, or you walked in, or was it more inviting than you thought?
No, I mean, I think once I was there, people really just only cared about how hard you worked. And like in the media industry, and at that time in magazines, it was very much, you know, it was kind of like the investment banking, like there were schools, you know. I started at that first magazine, and then I went to go work for US, and I had a really tough boss. And then I went to go work at American Vogue. And I remember, my boss said, oh, here's your resume if you want to keep it. And it had a comment, because every person that interviews at Vogue interviews with Anna Wintour. And so I remember they gave me back my resume, and it said, Wendy, please see me. And that's what my resume said, you know, of my boss that hired me. And again, I probably wasn't like the stereotypical kind of heiress, you know, daughter of a, you know, CEO on the East Coast. I didn't go to any, you know, Ivy League university. I wasn't like a friend of a friend that they recommended. I was kind of just this girl that loved fashion, and that had been recommended by one of the PR people, a good friend of mine, who worked at Yves Saint Laurent at the time. And I think my boss was like, you know, I really just kind of saw that drive in you. And then later, Grace Coddington, who also interviewed me, said, you know, I just could tell that you like love fashion so much. And that's what they were looking for. But definitely, I think that my resume was kind of passed through, you know, like my resume was like, okay, are you sure? You sure you want to hire her? But in the end, you know, I worked there for 4 years, and it was an amazing school. It was kind of like a business school, I would say. And I learned so much about, you know, your first job, or not, it wasn't my first job, but I do have to say that, you know, I learned so much about interacting with people, about having all female bosses, which I thought was amazing. And I, you know, I think that was the beginning of the digital transformation had not taken place yet. So it was interesting to see, you know, Anna's Vogue then and see it now, and in a different relationship, obviously, but it was a really great school. But definitely, I mean, I think that, you know, when you move to New York, there is kind of a certain club that exists in media, in banking. I mean, I talked to my husband about it, and, you know, his father said, you know, if you do your master's in Mexico City, I'll pay for it. But if you do your MBA in the US, I'm not going to pay for it. My husband's like, I don't want to be in debt. So he did it here. But he's like, yeah, he's like, it was hard because I wasn't part of the club. He's like, I wasn't part of like the MBA, you know, it makes things easier. So in a way, yeah, it made things not challenging. I have to say, I never experienced any sort of kind of like, you're not part of it. The opposite, I think they like that, you know, my mom was like the mom that sent like chilaquiles to, you know, the office, and, you know, sent me like care packages of like toilet paper. And, you know, I think people thought that was like really sweet and an interesting part of who I was, I guess.
You know, the thing, so I want to talk a little bit about like the devil wears Prada type. That's like the image people have of kind of what the editor-in-chief of a magazine is. And I don't know if that's affiliated with the fact that it's a woman in like this very strong and powerful position. Like, I don't know if that's why that whole dynamic occurs often. And you talk about having all female bosses. I just think that's a very interesting thing, that it's always, when you look at female bosses that are strong, it somehow translates to them being a certain type of person. Tell me what you learned from the female bosses that you thought, from your female bosses, that made you stronger, and what are the things that challenged you?
I think like from the beginning I had, when I worked at Mademoiselle, and then I worked at Elle, and then I worked at Vogue, and everyone pretty much like all my directors were women. And I think one of the things that I learned is that you can have this work-life balance. A lot of the times in Mexico, people will even ask you like, oh, so-and-so got married on your team. Is she going to resign? You're like, no. And that's not even like in New York, that's not even a question, you know, it's that I feel like, and that work-life balance and how important it is. And I think that is one of the main things that I learned. And also just to be like decisive and opinionated and be ready to make decisions. I think having worked at Vogue, I knew that, you know, Anna is an incredibly decisive woman that knows, you know, exactly what she wants, and wants confident, strong women around her. And so I always thought that was something that I looked up to. You know, I think all the women that I worked directly for, what the fashion director, and then for a style director. And I remember them saying, just, you know, whenever you meet her, just go in and be sure, you know, state your purpose, you know, have like fight for your for what you think, you know, for what you're presenting to her. And I always thought that was really interesting. And I think it's something that that as a woman, I really value, is like that, you know, just being a good leader. I think women by instinct are good leaders, and they have that, I don't want to say always maternal, because it's not maternal, but women are sensitive, but they're also like strong decision makers and compassionate. And I mean, now you see, like, I don't know if I'm sure you've seen that analysis of like all the women that have been country leaders that have like managed the coronavirus better. You know, I mean, I think that there's a reason for that. And I think the women that I worked with were all really successful. Some were single, some were married, some had to balance life, some did not. And I think they were all just like really good role models because they were super successful. And fashion is an industry that, although I think could be better about having more female CEOs in those, in the kind of business positions, I do think that it's very, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for women in fashion. There needs to be more on the corporate side, but I think that of all the industries that I've been around, I think it's one that's women have really grown into great, powerful positions.
So one of the things that I'm super interested in asking you about, and I hadn't asked you this question when we met previously, is you talk about, you feel like you're from El Paso, like you're from the borderlands, which is, you know, pretty much how we describe it. How was that accepted when you, like, there's this Mexican American woman going to Mexico City to run, you know, Mexico, Latin American Vogue? Was that like an automatic welcome? Were people a little, you know, thinking, oh, is this going to work out? Or
Yeah.
how did that go?
It's funny because I moved with my husband, and he's from Mexico City and grew up here. And he, you know, one day was like, Karla, I'm being asked to run a Brazilian bank in Mexico. What do you think? And he was like, listen, like, I get it if you don't want to do it. I don't want you to leave your job and kind of leave everything that you built to, and I thought about it, and he's like, but you know, here, you know, it makes sense financially, even if it's for a few years. And he kind of like, he's very organized and you know, everything is always like in terms of, you know, finance and like kind of long term. And so he's like, this is how much we would save. This is how much we would save here. You know, what do you think? And so I was like, listen, like, I don't want to not do it because I'm scared, you know, out of fear of not finding something there. So let's go for it. So we went for it. And I remember my boss at the time, Edward Enninful, was like, I'm going to call Jonathan Newhouse, who is one of the owners of Condé Nast. I was like, I'm going to tell him that you're moving there. So, you know, someone called me from Condé Nast and was like, oh, we heard you're moving down. And so I ended up, when I first moved, I was kind of doing some freelance back and forth, and it was really hard to kind of leave New York and leave a city like New York, for, even though Mexico has everything that, you know, you would need. It's just, you know, a different country. And I remember a friend of mine from one of the designers of Parenza Schooler was like, oh, right, you're going to move to Mexico and be the editor-in-chief of Vogue Mexico. And I was like, well, that's kind of my dream job. But I don't know, there's someone there right now, and they're not going to like boot her over to like, you know, bring her in. And I'll never forget this because I'm going back a few years. I dated this guy from Mexico City, and I remember him saying like, oh, one day he was like, did you tell someone that I was going to help you get a job at Vogue Mexico? And I'm like, turned to him, I'm like, listen, I may be like madly in love with you and like do stupid things for you, but the one thing I will never ask you for is a job, because I've never asked a man to get me a job, and I don't need a man to get me a job. I can get my own job. I can make the call. So call, you know, like,
that deserves a snap.
Yeah,
like that
I
was
like, listen, like, don't even think for a minute that I would ask you for that kind of favor. So anyway, so I interviewed, and then they called me. I was pregnant. I got pregnant in 2015 in March when I moved, and I was doing some freelance. And then, you know, one of the directors there was like, listen, can you come meet with us on November 23rd? And I said, well, that's the week I'm giving birth, but if for some reason I'm free. And the twins came early, so I was free. So I like got up, got dressed for the first time. I put my skirt on. It didn't zip up the whole way, so I had to like put on a coat over, and met with them. And they ended up calling me back in January saying, you know, one of the girls that was their editor that was there before me is moving to Colombia. Are you interested in the job? And I was like, absolutely. So it was kind of like my dream job, and it all happened so like quickly. It kind of like the stars aligned. But then my husband lost his job, like a few weeks after I signed my contract, and he was like, listen, like, we moved here because of me, but you know, this is an amazing opportunity. So I'm not gonna, you know, I'm gonna look for jobs in Mexico, and we're not gonna go back to New York because you know, signed this commitment, and you should be able to give it a go. And so, yeah, but it was, you know, I think in the beginning people were like, oh, she's from New York, she probably thinks she knows everything. And so, you know, people were resistant to in the beginning, like the brands, and, you know, to just kind of be like, oh, she's going to do, you know, a great job. And so I think, yeah, they were like, what does she know about Mexico? She's never lived here. But I kind of did, like, vicariously through Juarez. So I think there was a bit of that. And then there was also, like, you know, when I would call people from New York, like, what magazine? Where's that? We don't sell there. We're not interested. You know what I mean? So it was a little bit of resistance on both sides.
Wow, so you've been straddling that whole thing with the United States and Mexico your whole life. Growing up in El Paso, you're like, I know this. I can do this. We did this in El Paso all the time. So let's talk. I really believe there is Mexico and Latin American Vogue before Karla Martinez, and then there is the new Vogue, which I think has been quite, and we're going to go over some of those photographs in a minute. I'm just cueing Kayla, so that she knows. But before we do that, I want to talk about that because I love your Vogue covers. Like, I am in love with all of it. Like, it's just so incredibly progressive. And it really, like, those covers, and we'll go through them in a minute. I know this is like when you're like right before you go to commercial, but we're not. But anyway, so it's like those covers are so amazing. So one of the things I want to talk to you about before we go into those covers is social justice, like racial justice, female empowerment. All of those things I think are very, very clear in what we've seen on the covers. But I want to know, where did you come, like, where did this come from? Where did your idea and thought and kind of your reimagining of what Vogue could be come from? Like, what shaped that?
I mean, I have to say, I think having grown up in El Paso, and then I moved to New York and started working in media, and I kind of just was like, there's no one really looks like me, but that's okay. And then you kind of like grow up and you start to think like, that's not okay. You know, there are people that look like me, and for so long we've been seeing, even like in Mexico, for example, like, you know, when I first moved here, I noticed like every cover was like either, you know, some European model or some American model. It was very rarely like the Mexican model, you know, the Mexican woman, and not just at Vogue, it media across the land, across all platforms. And like, even when you think of like telenovelas, I mean, it is kind of like the beautiful woman was always like Thalia, you know, like the blonde, green-eyed woman. And I always kind of like questioned that. And I think I really questioned, you know, when I grew up going to my mom's hometown in Mexico, and my cousins always being like, what did you bring? ¿Qué trajiste del otro lado? And
We know that.
And I always like would be like, why are they so fascinated with that? And like, I would always wonder, like, what was, you know, why is everyone so obsessed with like what's going on there? So I think in like 2015, when the election happened, and it also was, or 2016, sorry, a year we don't want to remember, but so that year, I feel like Mexico had received like such bad press, and like everything was so like bad. And I think Mexicans really did like an introspection of like, hey, we do have interesting people here. We are doing interesting things. We don't need to bring in everything. And I always used to see that like Europeans would come to Mexico and create these amazing brands, but like, where were the Mexicans doing that? You know what I mean? So I think I started thinking about all of this, and I started noticing that people really wanted to see, like when I would go to the European collections, like there were 6 Dominican girls in the Valentino show, and like 2 new Mexican girls, and people were very much open to like seeing a different type of beauty. And something happens in magazines, in modeling, that a lot of the times, like the big kind of European, the big famous models, the Gigi's, the Bellas, they give them to like the European countries, you know, the strong European markets and the Asian markets, because there's money and they want like big campaigns. And in Mexico, there's not like those big kind of brands with the big reach. So I found like, okay, we would ask for like a model and they'd be like, no, but I can give you this model. And like, she would have like 5 million followers, but like she had nothing to do with my market. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't we start putting Latin models on the cover? And when we did that, I saw like, it didn't matter if she had 2,000 followers or 10 million. It still got a response from women saying, I'm so happy you put a model with an afro on the cover. I'm so happy you put someone that that looks like all the girls in our country, you know? And so I also think that people became more aware just because of social media of you know, being more representative of beauty. And I remember the first boss I had, who's a great, very successful woman, she said to me, you know, we just stick with like the kind of European models, and, you know, we don't do celebrities, because, you know, in the US they do them in a different way. They usually do them when the movies come out, and, you know, and so I was like, but there has to be like interesting people. So we tried our first, like when it was 2018, we put like Camila Cabello on the cover and people went crazy. And ever since then, I was like, okay, there has to be like, we have to be more representative. We have to start changing the conversation. And we started doing it little by little. And then—
So let me have them pull up some of the pictures, because I think you shared with us, and so you can kind of talk about some of those covers, and kind of talk to us about kind of what you were thinking at the time and what message you were trying to send out.
So I always say that there was like a kind of before and after Ywca, because I think Ywca was I'll give you like the brief story. So in 2019, 2018, one of the editors said to me, you know, Alfonso Cuarón's coming out with a movie. It's going to be, Netflix is releasing it, and there's a woman named Ywca on the cover. What do you think we do? We put her on the cover. And I was like, I'm not going to put a no name person on the cover. Why would I do that? You know, we're going to be like what, there, no one's going to know who she is. It didn't even cross my mind that like, she's like this indigenous woman, right? Like that wasn't the reason why I said no. The reason was because no one knew who she was. And so September rolls around. I go to New York for Fashion Week, and an entertainment editor I know says to me, oh, have you seen Roma? And I said, no, but we're doing something with the cast. We're trying to think of what to do with the cover. And she said, oh, you would never put that girl on the cover. And I was like, but why not? And why is she so sure that I shouldn't put her on the cover? So I called Regina, who works in my office, and I said to her, put a hold on Ywca, make sure no one shoots her before us. We have to do this. I think, you know, at that point she had seen the movie and she's like, it's amazing. It's 100% going to the Oscars. And I said, I think, you know, to put her on the cover would be amazing. And we did it. And it just was kind of a snowball effect of of amazing comments from indigenous women, literally like around the world, not even just in Mexico and Latin America, but in the US, in Asia. I mean, it was so well received. And I think my friend Audrey, who I mentioned earlier, said to me, thank you for putting someone that finally looks like me on the cover. And I thought about that and I was like, for so long, we've been used to, without taking merit from, someone like Kate Blanchett, Julia Roberts, these amazing women, but there are amazing women that are our skin color too. And so I thought that more than ever, it was really important to start this conversation and start something, because from media, I mean, growing up, think about what we saw when we were younger. It was one type of image. And I was really happy, and I say before and after Ywca because it didn't just happen in media in Mexico. I think, oh my God, you can see my dog food in the back now. I think after that, you started to see, Head and Shoulders took her as her spokesperson, different brands, hired women of color, women with curly hair, whereas before it was like, the kind of token Latina for every brand. And I feel like this really pushed people out of that comfort zone. And that makes me really happy. With the Dominican models.
You want to push that down? Where are the Dominican models?
Oh yeah, they're up here. With the Dominican models, which actually we did our September cover this year too, with Dominican girls. In Dominican Republic, having curly Afro hair is like not cool. It's not. And even like me, like I was so like brainwashed from seeing women with straight hair that now I'm always straightening my hair instead of like letting my curls loose. And with these girls, I remember we put Linacy on the cover, who's not one of these girls, but in 2017, and she said we let her Afro like natural, and she said she got so many notes saying, thanks to you, I feel proud to wear my hair like that. And so so I decided that, we needed to support the Mexican and Latin American models that were going down the runway, and that designers were embracing. And I was like, if I'm not putting on the cover, who is putting them on the cover? And so we just started, it's been something that's, I obviously wish I could say I've been doing it since I started, but, we moved to do it more and more. And now it's just part of what the magazine is and part of who we are. And it's interesting because, it's Mexico and Latin America, and, we come in all shapes, sizes, colors. We all look really different. I feel like that's like one of the most amazing things about Mexico and Latin America. And I'm sure you've gotten the comment of, oh, you don't look Mexican. And you're like, well, what do we look like? But what does that mean, right? And then last year we did this cover for the 20th anniversary of Vogue in Mexico and Latin America. And we felt like it wasn't a time to just talk about fashion, but really to talk about like the beauty in Latin America and who represents us. And so we shot Maria Lorena Ramirez, who's the Raramuri runner. She is from like 5 hours outside of Chihuahua, from Sierra Tarahumara, from a small town called Huachochi. And it was amazing because, these dresses are beautiful and she runs in these sandals. And then Netflix did a documentary on her. So that was really amazing. And then if you go down, we just did, we shot this girl, Karen Espinoza. This was shot over Zoom because it was during the lockdown, and a Mexican photographer named Dorian Ulises Macias said to us, I'm doing like a different casting story with different Mexican women. And I love this girl. She lives in Oaxaca. And if I told you how many comments, the controversy, the chicken, the gallina generated, you wouldn't believe it. But basically, she was asked to talk about like why she loves fashion, and it's because of her grandmother. And this rooster, it's a rooster, right? Rooster. This rooster is her grandmother's like favorite thing. So she wanted to like pose with like her favorite animal. And she's the first model from Oaxaca that we featured, and it really like went around the world again. And it's amazing because it's like, God, how is it that she's the first person on the cover? You know, like, how is it that these girls haven't been discovered before? But I just think it talks about all the work we still have to do. Then our October, this girl over here in the yellow cover is from Juarez. Dorian also shot that. He did a casting of the different women, and she was one of them. And then this girl on the left is called Sion Moreno. She actually grew up in El Paso and now lives in Los Angeles. And she's like a young and coming actress on on one of the Netflix series. And she's transgender. And we did pictures of her over Zoom as well. And then these pictures are the mariachi women of Juarez and El Paso. And we went to El Paso last year with a photographer, Ana Hop, to do these pictures. These pictures were a few months after the shooting, after August 3rd. And these women, like, it was really important to them to sing and, you know, to really give hope to the community, and like during a really difficult couple of months. And we did an amazing video with them. And the woman that does the mariachi outfits is based in Juarez, and they all had like really amazing stories. So then the girl on top, so I don't know if you saw, but there was something called the Vogue Challenge during the lockdown, and it was after British Vogue did an issue about like heroes and people like during the pandemic. And so people were challenged to like create their own Vogue cover. And my friend Eugenia, who lives in Berlin, was like, Carla, you must see this girl from Juarez. She's amazing. Her name's Fernie Ruiz, and she did the Vogue Challenge, and her dream is to be in Vogue. And, you know, she's in a wheelchair, and she's a big activist for people con discapacidades. And so I saw her, and I started like following her chats, and like, she's talked to everyone, and she went to high school with like now girls that I know from, like younger girls that I know from Juarez. But it's this idea that there's so many smart and amazing women out there, and Vogue really is so much more about fashion. It's more about, you know, covering what's going on culturally and what people are talking about and what they want to see. And the same as me when I was a young girl and wanted to listen to all these stories and learn about people, I feel like now I can, you know, share these stories. And I think that one of my favorite parts of my job is the storytelling part and discovery, you know. And I feel like if there is, so our September issue is about hope. It was done in collaboration with 26 other Vogues about the idea of hope and what it means these days. So Fernie wrote one of the letters, and her letter is amazing. I'll send it to you. It's basically, you know, she was born and had to be in a wheelchair, and she mentions that no one really had hope in her, but her mom gave her that and kind of like pushed her to give a voice to more people, and to people in wheelchairs, to people that are born with you know, physical impairments, and how, you know, especially she talks a lot about how, you know, in the US it's just a given, you know, you have wheelchair access, and people are very sensitive, you know, everywhere you go, you can move around and you can access. But in Mexico, it's not like that. You know, we still have to fight for people to be more aware that there's people with special needs that need help, and that sometimes they can't enter buildings, and you need to figure out, like, I have to say, I think even the building where I live, there's no ramp, you know, and how those things, like, we have to talk about them, because there are so many challenges. And I see someone saying that there's still a lot of people for challenges in the US. So just imagine Mexico, that's like light years behind, you know?
So I think Kayla has a question from the audience.
Yes. So Rebecca asked Karla, as a Latina with such an important leadership role, what is your take on the Bon Appetit situation, where not all of the creators were being paid the same or being paid at all, and it was the women of color who were on the downside of that?
Well, I think that obviously it's a situation that I know the company is taking really seriously to change. I actually, like, fortunately never felt like I was paid less, because I think like what has happened in media is that obviously media, like the print advertising, is not what it was like when I started, right? In 2000, like I probably wouldn't make nearly as much as my boss would make. And I think a lot of the times what happened is, like, you know, obviously the industry is getting smaller, so unfortunately the pay keeps going down, and it's not I can only share my experience. Like, I know that, for example, when I started at W, I probably didn't make as much as the person there before me, but also the team was much smaller and the budgets shrank just because of the nature of what was happening to the industry. You know, it's a lot has been moving digitally into different platforms. But I know that it's something that they take very seriously, and that once it came to light, you know, they have been taking steps to immediately fix. I know, and Dr. Acosta and I talked about this, is I think that, you know, it's so important to hire. It's our job, like, not just as the magazine to represent more women of color and more Latinas, but also to hire, and to be sure, you know, to make sure that our editorial doesn't look, you know, in just one way. You know, I think that's something that's really important, and something that I know that the company is taking really seriously, and have made, you know, like a very big step. I know that Vogue US, I don't know specifics because I don't work there, but I know they just took the 15% pledge, which is to be more representative, you know, across fashion in general, to hire more, take hiring the diversity issue very seriously, and it's something that in Mexico we have to do as well, and it's definitely top of mind. So I can only speak about my experience, but I know that that this is a situation that is being that they take very seriously, and that they want to fix and make better.
Karla, I want to ask you a question before Kayla asks a question, because it's so important. Like, I think it's so important. Like, for example, the fact that you rose to the level that you're at Vogue, now you could tell our stories. Like, I wasn't aware of how many of these images came from Juarez, represented our community. And so when you talk about representation, and when you talk about the ability of other voices to be heard, I'm not sure, if you had not been in that position, that people could have stepped back from that to see the beauty in our community, to see the beauty in our people, to see the beauty in our color and our different colors, because we all have a different color. You and I talked about the fact that we were morenitas, you know, but we had cousins that were güeritas, and there was always this sense of colorism even within our own communities. But the ability to be able to highlight the beauty of all of our skin tones whether, and I was just listening to an article, I was just listening to something in Spanish about Afro-Mexicans, you know, specifically in Veracruz and kind of what they go through. So I want to commend you for having that foresight to be able to see the beauty in all women, in every color, in all hair types and styles, because that's very important. So I want to get back to a statement that you made earlier, kind of glossing over it. So August 3rd, August 3rd. Let's talk about August 3rd. You were in El Paso.
Yeah.
Tell us about kind of like you had come home and tell us about that experience of August 3rd and how you experienced that, and then how maybe others in Mexico, once you went home, their experience of that.
You know, I think I had flown to El Paso because my daughters love being at my mom's house, and literally just came back from Cancun, and they told my husband, they're like, oh, we like El Paso more. And my husband's like, okay, well, next time I won't spend any money and I'll send them to your mom's house. But so I had just come home because, you know, obviously we all know and love El Paso because it's a very safe place. And, you know, Mexico's, you know, it's not like I'm letting them go to the park, you know, by them. Well, not even in El Paso by themselves. I mean, they're very young, but there is a sense of safety, and I was really excited to go and have them, you know, play at my mom's in her yard. And so Saturday, my mom and I are on the phone with Mrs. Rolon, and I was like, hey, Mom, like maybe we'll go to the Gap later. I want to go to Cielo Vista. And then all of a sudden, like the alerts start coming through about the attack. And it was just it was so surreal, like to listen to it. Because obviously, you know, unfortunately, we all remember where we can be, where you heard of, you know, I remember I was on my honeymoon when Sandy Hook happened, and I'll just like never forget it. I never forget the way I felt, and like, but then you're like, but how can this happen in my hometown? Like, who was it? And like, I automatically you could just tell from I was like, no one in El Paso would do this. It has to be someone from, you know, out of El Paso. And it was just really, really, really hard to register that this had happened. And then, you know, the stories started coming out, and it obviously really shook everybody. You know, I think it was something that really, like you said, like really a before and after in the city, and what it meant for the city, and being in El Paso and having grown up there, it was really important to, you know, come out with the El Paso strong and really support the businesses. But it was really like a day I'll never forget, because, you know, you have one of those headaches of, oh God, you know, because as you know, we were saying the other day, like everyone goes to Walmart. You know, it didn't matter if you were rich, poor, from whatever side of town, like it didn't matter. You know, you said you had a family friend of a friend that was going to pick up her daughter from the airport, and she was delayed, and she happened to be there. And then, you know, the girls soccer team, and there was just so much, you know, it could have been any of us. And I think that was the scariest part.
So this is kind of like a tough question. So in terms of all of that is happening in El Paso, you had the refugee issue, you had the kids in cages issue, you had all of that, like the family separation issue. I was wondering, like, how did people in Mexico City that you worked with or that you talked to, what was their reaction to what was happening in your hometown? Like what was the conversation like? Because I think we know what the conversation was on this side, but what was the conversation on that side?
I remember everyone, you know, was reaching out, and they were like, unfortunately in Mexico, people are like, not surprised this happened again in the US, you know, like they're like, you know, in Mexico we have to worry about narcos, and here in the US you have to worry about crazy people with guns, you know, or like hate crimes. And it's really like unfortunately, this is what the conversation is, right? Like how, like in Mexico, it's more like va a seguir pasando if, you know, these kind of armed rifle or people are allowed to like go into Walmart and buy a gun, you know, buy like a semi-automatic rifle. I don't think Walmart says them anymore, but I think, and also people in Mexico felt very much like, you know, there were people from Juarez, there were people from Chihuahua that died. There was, I think, like a German couple. Like it really saw no borders. And I think that was what the scary part was, is that, you know, it was obviously a crime against Hispanics and against Mexicans. So it really, there was no, but I do think that the conversations are always, you know, in Mexico, we have to worry about one kind of violence, and in the US, we have to worry about another kind of violence. And they're both equally terrifying, I have to say, like living in both. And I think people are concerned. I think, you know, I think people are very aware of what's going on with the kids and that how inhumane it is. And now we have our president with like the National Guard, you know, acting as a border wall. So it's kind of like, you know, I think it's a really complex situation, and it's definitely something that is at people's, you know, in people's mind about, you know, we're both living in dangerous places for different reasons.
So Karla, as we begin to wrap this up, I want to ask you, how do you see your role in promoting social and racial justice given the platform you've been given?
Well, I think that, you know, I think it's important, again, to really be representative of the world that we live in, our culture, like our, you know, our skin tone, our, who we are as Latina women. I think it's so important right now to show, like, as I was saying, like in 2016, people were talking about like, you know, Mexicans in such a bad light. And I was like, you know what, there's some amazing people down here, things going on. And if we don't highlight it, who is gonna highlight it? And you know, I'm glad that we have this platform to talk about these things, to talk about these women, for people to discover that there's a whole, you know, that there's a Raramuri runner that, you know, runs in sandals and has won races around the world. And she doesn't have, you know, designer sneakers or like 20 pairs of leggings, you know, like we all do, and isn't fortunate enough to, but she has the ability to, you know, run super long distances in her sandalias. And I think that it's so important. I was talking to my friend Audrey about talking just about social justice and what it means. And I think that the platform, you know, if I'm like I always said, like, you know, just one person. Like I remember, you know, I started a charity with my sister Veronica and a few friends in New York called Project Paz to help the victims of violence, of drug violence in Mexico, in Juarez. And I remember that my mom was like, oh, someone told me that it didn't matter, that one person wasn't going to make a difference. And I'm like, that's not true. If everyone thought that way, then where would we be? You know? And so I think that through giving Latinas voice, giving people that haven't been given this voice because they aren't, you know, 6 feet tall and super skinny. I think that kind of the idea that just a certain type of person should be in a magazine is not what a just and fair society is. I think that we really have to like be introspective and start new conversations and really give a voice to people that that haven't, you know, been represented for the past couple of years.
So before we wrap up, I know there are a few Loretto alums that are so proud, you know, about, you know, your affiliation. And I know there's some Loretto students here, but beyond that, there are just women and girls here. And by women and girls, I mean women and then young girls that kind of tuned into this that are so excited to, young girls
Go inside
specifically.
because it got dark. It became night.
That, so I'm sure they have dreams. And so what advice do you give to these young women that, about pursuing your dreams, about making it happen? What kind of advice would you offer?
I was always thinking, when I was younger, I always thought about my dad who passed away in 2003 when I was in New York. And I remember coming home and my mom saying me asking my mom, do you want me to come home? You know, do you want me to stay with you? And she was like, absolutely not. You know, this is like been your dream. This is what your father, you were lucky enough to have a father who really believed in you and being a kind of fearless woman leader, and you have to continue to follow your dreams. And she was super right. And I think what, I was never that girl that the boys were chasing, and I never had a lot of boyfriends and I think in a way I was kind of lucky because I wasn't really distracted, and I knew that, I remember being at graduation and my mom being like, oh, so-and-so's daughter's graduating with honors. And I was like, damn, I'm not graduating with honors. But then when I got to college, which we talked about a little bit, is I did really well in college. And I know I love Loretto, and I think it taught, I think, was it a super Ivy League prep school? No. I mean, I don't think, and I think that's okay. But I do think that we learned, and I know it because I still have my friends from Loretto, to be purposeful. I think we were encouraged to build and be anything that we wanted. And I think that was really helpful, and not kind of feeling insecure. So I remember when I got to college, to the 500-person auditorium with, a bazillion people, goofing around, and, young college kids at 18, I was really focused and driven, and I wasn't distracted by any guy. Really, I knew, and my dad, always said to us, I'm a doctor, you are privileged that I've been able to give you, a good life in El Paso. If you go somewhere else, you're just another normal girl. And he always used to say, the only thing I'm leaving you is your education. So use it wisely. And so once I got to college, I did really well my first semester. I remember I got a 4.0, and I was like, I want to get a 4.0 every semester. And I ended up my last semester, I think my finance classes were where I went totally wrong. But I graduated summa cum laude, and that made me so happy because I never, I always kind of felt bad because my parents didn't have that honor roll national NHS student. But then I was like, okay, I'm going to make them proud in college, and I'm going to make them even prouder when I start working. So I think that was something that really, I think I don't know I might be making a generalization, but and I'm sure it happened to you, is I never wanted to be I thought, I think we're all raised to think that, we have to find a prince and get married, and that's, and I feel I didn't dream so much of the wedding dress much as I tell you, I dreamt of a suit, of wearing a two-piece suit. So I was always really excited by those movies in the 80s, the Working Woman. And that was kind of my dream. That's what I really knew that I wanted. And that's not to say that, my sister got married at 25, and, I didn't envy her life for a really long time. I think I envy it for some reasons, and love mine for others. But I think that maybe because I wasn't you know, kind of the pretty girl in high school and being kind of fawned over. I think that kind of helped me build up or maybe want different things. I don't know. I think, but I always say, like, you know, I'm so happy I got married at 35. It's unfortunate that as women, like there's a, you know, at 40, it does get harder to have kids. I mean, scientific, not, but I feel like everything was kind of at the right time. And I wish when I was like in my 20s, I wasn't stressed out about meeting someone. Does that make sense? Even though, like, no matter how much people tell you when you're younger, don't worry about it. And you're like stressing out about it. Like, but certainly don't worry about it in high school. You know, I don't know. I think that's something that's really important. And I think that as young women, like, and you see it like in our culture, it's like, you know, the princess movies and there should be more about kind of, you know, a different, like fulfilling your own personal dreams before you share those dreams with someone else, right?
Right. You know, I think that's so interesting that you would say that, because I had my daughter when I was 35. I had my daughter when I was 35. Oh, it's okay. It's the Zoom world now. And it was like, people would ask me, you're not going to have kids? Like, why aren't you married yet? Like, there was something wrong with me. So I'm glad you talk about that, because there's nothing wrong with taking your time. And there's nothing wrong with making your own decisions about when that happens, whether you're 25 or 35, but not being defined by those roles that I think as Latina, and I'm not just saying like, it's especially true, at least for me, in my Latino family, it was like, ¿por qué no te has casado? Y no vas a tener hijos? You know, and I think that is something really important for women and girls to come away with. It's okay. Like, it's okay to make the decisions when they're the right decisions at the right time for you. And your decision and my decisions may be different, but as long as we're all fulfilled. So, Karla, I want to thank you for sharing your life, sharing your story with us. We are so proud of you, and we're so happy. I'm super excited. Like, I want to subscribe to Mexico and Latin American Vogue because I want to see what's next. Like, I'm so excited. I'm waiting for there to be like like a star on a mountain somehow, like somewhere embedded in there. But anyway, so thank you for representing us. Thank you for telling our story. Thank you for having the foresight and the passion to look at beauty from a different lens, because it's that will empower us to be stronger and to be more fulfilled as women, and understanding that our beauty comes in very different sizes and different hair colors and different skin colors, and it's all still beauty. So I don't know if you have any last words to share.
Thank you so much. I mean, I feel like I always meet, you know, during these past couple of months, I've met some amazing women via Zoom, and I would love to meet you when I go vote in November. No, even if I have to drive there.
Look at this.
The river. Yeah, for sure. I know. I feel like that's such an important message, and like, you know, I was talking to a friend about it, and like, you know, when you were younger, I remember working at Vogue, and like, I remember when George Bush won that kind of contested battle and the editors were crying, and I didn't understand why they were crying. It's like, it's not that big of a deal. And then, you know, fast forward, then it is a big deal, you know, it is a big deal. And I feel like that kind of, to teach the next generation, which I do think they are more aware, you know, like my nieces that are 15 and they turned 15 in December. They're so aware of like the Black Lives Matter movement and how important it is, and taking care of the environment and this idea of social justice, right? I think those generations are, you know, I don't know if it's social media. I don't know if it's always, you know, watching television, but I really hope that that Latinos, especially Latinos, see the importance of voting, and and you know, just encouraging people that that it's so important, right? And I'm sure you work with a lot of different women, so I think if there's one last message, it's just that your vote does count. I know people are always like, Texas always goes red. Maybe not. You know, your voice matters, and it's important. And speaking of that, I have to call my mom and ask her where my voter registration card is, because I know it's in El Paso somewhere. But thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
I
Don't
love
go yet,
meeting
Karla,
you.
because I want to take a picture of the two of you. That's why I popped up. I
Oh,
want to make
okay.
sure that
You're
I
already
get a
gonna
good
hang
picture
up.
of you guys smiling. Ready?
Kayla, can I take a picture without my glasses too?
Hold on, I haven't taken it yet.
Oh, with and without.
Yes. Ready? I'm trying to get rid of the chat. That's fine. Okay. Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me save it. Okay, if you want to take off your glasses.
Pretty. My regular eyes.
Okay, hold on. Let me double check. And one with me.
Thank you. Will you
Wait,
send?
wait, hold on. One more.
Oh,
Yeah, she's gonna be in this one.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Well, thank you so
all.
much, Karla.
thank you, Dr. Acosta. Thank you,
We didn't get
Kayla.
to talk about COVID in Mexico, but that's okay. That's for
Oh my
another time.
God.
I know we had so much to. We didn't even get to a lot. I have a bunch of like questions right here.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Karla. It was great to visit with you. And absolutely, when you come into town, like we got to get together.
Yeah, and I'll send you some magazines.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
And
Sign them.
congratulations on all your work, because I know it's, as we said, it's super important. And I think we have to start girls young, not thinking about just, you know, finding a man and, you know, really going for their dreams, because it's possible.
Right. It doesn't have to be the Princess Diaries.
No.
You can be your own. You can be your own prince. You can be your own queen.
Exactly.
You don't need anything else. All right. Thank you so much, Karla. We will see you soon. Take care.
Stay
Thank you to
healthy.
everybody who joined us. Thank you all.
Everybody. Bye.
Bye.